Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Shadowlands Alpha class preview. Man, it's a bloody great day for Shamans. We just covered enhancement on the channel, so you can check out that video, and now it's time for the Elemental Shaman. And you know what? It's also great. I'm really pleased with the changes that Blizzard have went with for this spec, and they really have just knocked out some of the larger downsides of just aspects of, well, really both DPS specs, Legion through BFA designs. Their resource system is changed. It's a mini revamp, like with enhancement, so if you want a spec that asks you to make decisions based on what resources you've got access to, but, you know, without anything as simple as, say, a single energy or mana bar, then yeah, Elemental could be the way to go for you. But there is a downside. There's a lot of stuff here that doesn't necessarily feel cohesive, and a lot of the potential resides in one very exciting ability that we'll get into later. Now, do you want to help us A, overcome YouTube ad revenue literally having, and B, get more in-depth alpha previews going? Well, Patreon is the way to help, and in return, you will get a lovely big pack of physical loot in the post. If you're on that tier, you can get your name in the credits, early access to stuff, BTS. Seriously, you have saved our butts so much recently. Cheers, all the viewers, thank you, and with that, let's go. First, let's go over the core changes. As with enhancement, Maelstrom is gone. Your only resource is mana, and that only comes into play for off-spec healing. The fundamentals are still here though, making use of Lava Surge procs for chunky Lava Burst hits and filling downtime with Lightning Bolts to get a big Earth Shock off. Instead of Maelstrom though, this is done via Fulmination, something you may remember from WoD. Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning will stack Fulmination up to 8 stacks, and Earthshock will consume those stacks to deal a big old ton of damage. Then for AoE, Chain Lightning also builds up Seismic Thunder stacks, which grants instant cast Earthquakes. On paper, it's not a huge difference, but it feels a lot more engaging than just sitting there watching your Maelstrom bar. If you, say, want to cast weak Earth Shocks, but while on the move, that's possible, as is maybe hard casting Earthquake if the situation suits. The partially stacking nature also means that you can consume your Fulminations partially, so maybe using 3 Fulmination stacks instead of all 8, well, that's not that punishing, but it would make, say, movement feel a little bit better. Similar to how Earthshock used to consume extra Maelstrom in Legion. Now, this is where we get to the unpruning aspect of this, because like with the other Shaman specs, Elemental now has access to Healing Stream and Searing Totem's baseline, as well as Lightning Shield and Flame Tongue weapon, although that's a bit superfluous, of course, to a caster spec. Flame Tongue's not really going to be doing anything unless you're autoing, and you're probably not going to be auto-attacking. More on some wasted opportunity later, I guess. Then they also have Chain Heal, which, combined with a specific talent, could actually leave Elemental as a pretty strong off-spec group healer, restoring some of that past identity. From Resto, they also took one more spell, Spirit Walker's Grace. Yeah, being able to cast on the move when necessary is always a huge bonus and feels pretty darn good. And really, all of these little additions, they kind of stop the Shamans from feeling like a different flavor of mage, and they make him feel a bit more like they did in the past, a bit more unique. And that certainly is fantastic. With that covered, we can move on to talent changes. Here, there are almost none, but this is still a very important section of the video, because the use and feasibility of talents has been changed up a lot. Aftershock is the same as it was, but it refunds Fulmination and Seismic stacks instead of Maelstrom. The major change, though, is Call the Thunder, which is replaced by Echoing Shock, and this one is great. It seems boring at first glance. It just repeats the next damaging or healing spell that you cast, but there are subtleties that make it very fun indeed, and a direction that this spec really could push. We'll talk about that one more in a second. No other talents have fundamentally changed, which actually causes something of a problem when compared to the stated philosophy. The class blog claims that Lava Surge procs and spreading Flame Shock are the primary focus of this spec, but the talents don't really allow that to be expanded upon. The only talent that does is Surge of Power, allowing for more Flame Shocks to be spread, and Master of the Elements to an extent. Most of the other talents revolve around the lightning and the nature spells. However, the addition of Spirit Walker's Grace, that is going to take some of, say, Ice Fury's strengths away, and then Elemental Blast and Stormkeeper, while they do have really fun Echoing Shock interactions, They do make that actually feel like a very strong build. More on that later, but yeah, like there could actually be some shifting priorities here and there. So there you go, that's what's up with the talents. We've got, yeah, a new one with Echoing Shock that is really cool, but then recontextualizations of other ones because of the fundamental changes to how this spec works. So with that covered, let's talk about pros and cons. So with the changes covered, let's just talk about feeling, and well, that's quite a pro for me, I would say. Like with enhancement, having access to all of these shaman favorite spells from the unpruning, that does make every spec feel more like a shaman in terms of what they can do. Access to Spirit Walker's Grace to either cast chain heals on the run, or just continue your full DPS rotation, that's very welcome. Having Healing Stream to supply some light heals also feels quite useful when out in the world, even if it's not huge, but in the world context, it does lessen a frustrating weakness, and then of course it can be useful in a group. In terms of having options, especially with the plethora of talents that are available, there's a huge amount of buttons that you can press when you're out in the world or in any content with this spec. Certainly I'd say that being able to alternate sort of strong on-use talents to kill mobs, it always just makes it feel like with this spec you've got more than just the core to use, be that your Elemental Blast, your Stormkeeper, or your Ice Fury. There's kind of always another thing to be thinking about, and I think that really is good for the top end of this spec. And then just as far as the core changes go, it is amazing how different it feels, not just being there staring at your Maelstrom bar. In some ways it's small, but it does change up the pace quite a bit, I think, and just having the spec's abilities being reframed like that, to me, has made this spec feel more engaging across the board. Now, with that said, let's talk about what I really feel could be the star of the show here, and that is Echoing Shock. This is really cool. Basically, right, it's a powerful resource that has synergy with your different spells. It repeats the next damage or healing spell after a 1-second delay, and it's up every 30 seconds. Now, it is definitely work in progress right now. It currently does not replicate Lava Burst, or say the damage bonus from a Fulminationed Earth Shock, which really is a bit weird. But you can, however, say Echo an Elemental Blast, right? So you'll do your first Elemental Blast, and then it'll echo the second one, and you'll actually get 2 buffs, which kind of doubles that talent's value when they're used together, and that's super satisfying. You can also echo an Ice Fury, right? So you can do your echoed Ice Fury, cast 1 Frost Shock, then the echo of the Ice Fury will kick in, refreshing your stacks, meaning that, yeah, you will have got an extra Frost Shock from that interaction, which again is kind of cool. It almost feels to me, because it's based on like the travel times and the intricacies of the timing of things hitting, a little bit like sort of a Winter's Chill-like situation. Not really sure if that one will make it live though. But say using it to replicate a Stormkeeper buffed spell, you know, that's also a pretty fun thing. So basically, right, it can amplify the power of your other talents and spells, and it's really, really satisfying to use. Planning and lining up various different effects for it is just really fun, and using it on the right spell, that will separate a player who is managing their cooldowns well from one who's just pressing the shiny buttons when they line up. That is, of course, as with many talent things, assuming that, say, Aftershock in the same row doesn't just beat it numerically, and that these interactions are actually intended by Blizzard. But suffice to say, a really cool direction that we found when testing this spec. As with any changes though, there are downsides, and while I do praise the addition of more Shaman tools, some are basically non-interactive. Like Flame Tongue, that means nothing to Elemental really, and Searing Totem, it's just a bit of automatic damage, right? There's no interaction there. Where the Enhancement Shaman has Searing Assault to buff it, Elemental has got nothing, right? It's just a totem that kind of sits there. It isn't really that engaging, and in that case, what's the point, right? Why is that button press there? What's it really achieving or doing? Why, doesn't it fit into other spells in some capacity for that more lava-oriented feel that Blizzard said they wanted to focus on with these class changes? Like the existing Storm Elemental talent is a really good example here, right? So it interacts with your lightning spells by stacking a cast time reduction, resulting in these huge moments of instant earthquakes and chunky earth shocks. It's super satisfying. Having the base Fire Elemental do the same with lava-oriented spells, that would fit the fantasy further. So there's just more stuff they could do there, and that Searing Totem feels like a wasted opportunity. The only talent that actually interacts with Lava Bursts, well, the talents are just minor, right? And in the case of Echo of the Elements, personally, I think it should be baseline. By granting 2 charges to a spell that can have a reset function, it's basically just adding a quality of life buffer to stop unfortunate RNG from wasting resets. So that's for quality of life. I actually think it's core to the spec feeling pretty good to play, so I think it should be baseline, and then that talent slot could maybe allow for something new, right, that interacts with the supposed core of the spec a bit better. As it currently stands, it feels like Fulmination and Lava Surge are just sometimes a bit at odds, 2 systems kind of dancing around each other rather than forming a cohesive spec. That can sometimes be the feeling you get. There's also the fear then that the fun Echoing Shock interactions that I talked about earlier, that they would result in just it being so hard to balance, and the Blizzard would either have to remove those interactions or nerf them heavily. I mean, especially when compared to, say, the simple but RNG like Aftershock talent. Overall for the cons, I guess, and this seems wild to say, this is the first spec that almost feels over-unpruned, and that is a bit of feedback the Blizzard specifically asked for. If they could trim away accurately, or maybe instead provide just some meaning to more of the spells on this class, then it could feel really, really awesome to play. If it goes live with too many buttons, but when the buttons, some of them like the Searing Totem, just don't really feel like they're doing anything, then I think it could receive a more mixed response than it actually deserves. I mean, Echoing Shock is so cool, but then I look at the rest of the talents and it's like, that Searing Totem, we could do something with that. Our core fieriness, we could do something more with that. So there absolutely is room for improvement with this one, but I'll say this, the core is really strong. Echoing Shock is really strong. I've had a lot of fun playing this, and I definitely will be keeping an eye on this one, because some simple changes, well, could improve it massively, and I think just as a baseline, it is moving in a way better direction than Battle for Azeroth, in my opinion. So there you go, Elemental Shamans. Certainly 1 or 2 more things to be ironed out than is needed with enhancement, but really solid direction. I mean, the Echoing Shock is what a cool talent in terms of how it can use and synergize with other things. Yeah, I'm excited for this one. I'm really especially excited to just see how this one actually progresses over the alpha. So what can I say to end this video? Well, subscribe if you want more class stuff. If you want to check out enhancement, we just posted it. So yeah, I think you'll enjoy that one too. And I mean, yeah, just stay tuned, man. Shadowlands Alpha, there's so much stuff to do. It's a really exciting time. Cheers. I'll see you next time.